Good evening, viewers and listeners, and welcome back to Serving the People with me, your host, Anissa Batiste. Please let us start with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, do grant me inspiration that I may speak to the people about these serious matters concerning the abuse of inalienable human rights and freedoms. Please help our people to be aware of what is happening, that they may guard and protect and defend their own rights and freedoms here in our country from any attempts to tyranny and dictatorship. In Jesus' name I pray with thanksgiving. Amen. Let me first of all apologize for not bringing this program to you over the last few weeks. I was out of state doing some academic work, but I am back now and I'm happy to be with you. In this evening's program, I want us to address tyranny and dictatorship in Venezuela. Yes, tyranny and dictatorship in Venezuela. Now, I want to bring you, the public of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, up to date on some serious happenings that have been taking place in the country of Venezuela, which is not too far from us. And I want you to begin to think about the implications for us here when we look at the lack of appropriate response from our own Prime Minister, who is the chairman of CARICOM and CARICOM generally. Last elections in April 2013, when Nicolas Maduro won the election, he won with 51.62% of the votes. And the opposition, they got 49.12% of the votes. In other words, Maduro only won by about a 1% margin. And 49% of the people of Venezuela did not vote for him. Since that time, there have been a lot of protests in the street, and especially increasingly over the last 2 months or so, Venezuelans have been protesting, university students, opposition groups in various cities of Venezuela, and they are protesting over various issues. Election results, which they are saying the opposition, for example, were unfair, rising crime rates in the country, corruption, economic difficulties, and the denial of their freedoms. It's a whole host of things they are protesting against. These protests have turned violent. To date, we are told by a report from the International Press Institute out of Vienna, Austria, that to date there are at least 41 deaths, yes, and numerous injuries in the process. Students are among the dead. Members of the news media are among those injured and attacked. Generally speaking, the human rights and freedoms of the people of Venezuela are under attack. And I want you to look at two very important videos to explain more about this. In this first video, it will look at human rights abuses. Take a look, pay careful attention. Venezuela, the protest you won't see on TV. Retaking the peaceful nature and non-violence of our protest, the government wants to tell us that they will put some students in prison because they're protesting. We can't take it anymore. We have various reports of cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment of detainees. All can more or less corroborate and are willing to give public testimony about this. Attorney Venezuela Penal Reform. There are people who have been abused and others where the electricity from their homes have been cut off. They have disrespected important individual rights like the freedom of the press, the right to protest, the freedom of expression.
This was the last message Basil da Costa Frias wrote on his Facebook just before he was gunned down in anti-government demonstrations.
Student killed in demonstrations.
The 24-year-old joined his fellow protesters, hoping to bring a better life to Venezuela's 29 million citizens. That dream, however, was brought to an end.
The government doesn't come here either like Little Red Riding Hood, because the videos are there and there are photos of government armed groups that shot at students. Voice of Enrique Capriles, Miranda State Governor. .38 caliber and they call us the assassins. Students take the streets. They try to incriminate us as if we want to topple the regime. We don't want to topple the regime. We want to destroy the lie. The dissimulation of this regime is a totally different thing.
The refusal to conform is evident to what the state calls an inexistent crisis.
The rule of law is in decline. Our constitution is now basically just a piece of paper.
Resistance is futile against Venezuela's heavily armed police force. A bitter cocktail of anxiety and fear the students drink daily, mixed by the uncertainty of the iron fist. It doesn't matter if it's a man, woman, friend, girlfriend, or mother. It's a fear that strengthens their cry for justice, for the lack of democracy in Venezuela.
Fundamentally, the issue of aggression goes beyond the holding cells, meaning when people are detained. What's worse and more serious are the aggressions within the jails by the guards themselves. From the point of view of international humanitarian rights, that's torture.
A chilling episode from what could be a horror film occurred in Los Andes University in the state of Táchira. A student is almost raped, triggering hundreds of students to protest. They were tired of the requests falling on deaf ears, so they took to the streets for a peaceful demonstration. However, a violent backlash by authorities quickly dispersed the students, putting in doubt whether Venezuela's fundamental ideals were at all valid in the present day.
Whoever goes out and causes violence without permission to protest will be arrested. It doesn't matter who it is or what their name is. To march in this country, you need to ask permission according to the law. But now Chavez says, now they say they need permission. Their permission is right here. This is a country that has the right to protest. What permission? To freely and peacefully express one's opinion needs permission? That was the voice of Hugo Chavez, former president of Venezuela, while Nicolas Maduro, the current president, says you need permission to protest.
By rejection from their own government, protesters flood the streets, rallying under the same call: freedom. Once again, the demonstrations brought deadly repercussions. 3 lives were cut short. Hundreds were injured. Evidence of what was thought a democracy was now coming to an end. Venezuela's opposition gave its unanimous support to the students and condemned the violence, blaming it on the government.
They may point their finger at anyone with their lies, their media, their networks, their drug trafficking, or their corruption. But we will stand firm, loyal to the cause we have undertaken, loyal to our people, loyal to the truth and justice. Balls or courage is not measured in who insults more, or who talks the loudest, or who throws more stones. Courage is the one who, with the strength of their ideas and the strength of their thinking, changes the way you think of one another. That is courage. I want to say to those who accuse us today, we all know who the culprits are, who murdered these young people today, and you all know it. That's why they're wrong if they think accusing us will weaken us. That was Maria Machado of the parliament on the opposition side.
Took it to the web. Social media soon became the main source to speak out. It also created a bridge between the truth and a nightmare. According According to Jose Miguel Vivanco, director of Human Rights Watch Americas, ordering the arrest of opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez on charges of encouraging violence is an abuse of power on behalf of Chavismo, which currently controls the Venezuelan government.
What's more serious is that they try to put criminal responsibility on the opposition leaders. The government say the president and other authorities has no evidence of such charges.
According to Lorenza Ley of Operación Libertad, Latin America stands before one of its darkest chapters for the youth in recent years. Like a rose cut from the stem before it blossoms, so is Venezuela's youth, closed off as they stand before a crisis.
They're arresting me simply for my political party. I did absolutely nothing, but there is an arrest warrant. I'm an elected official for the Sucre state. They effectively realize the acts of abuse, brutality, not just by these patrolmen, but also by all law enforcement.
Despite the iron fist of the military, there is still a massive calling for street demonstrations. The will for change takes priority over well-being. The death toll and the number of injured rises. Human rights organizations are unable to sum the amount of damage against protesters.
Since 2004, the Venezuelan Penal Reform Forum has already filed a complaint for this systematic abuses in The Hague. We will add these new allegations not only of arbitrary detentions or the use of the judicial system for political persecutions, but now, and I want to say it because this is new, the rising use of torture as another persecution method.
As long as the wish for a better tomorrow stays in the hearts of Venezuelans, the demonstrators will stand firm, and there are many.
Yes, my dear people, did you see how horrible that was? Persons who are of the state authority, policemen and army men, kicking protesters in their head, hitting them with their guns in their backs and all those other behaviors, shooting at them, pellets and other things. And you even saw the injuries of some people who would have been shot and wounded. This is unacceptable. I want you to take a look at this next video quickly, and it has to do with the press being censored. Yes, freedom of expression, freedom of the press under censorship by the government, by its policies and its behavior towards journalists. Take a look. NTN24 up until this moment was on direct TV channel 725 in Venezuela. Now it seems it's no longer there. Venezuela, the protest you won't see on TV, censoring the media.
The Bible says, "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free."
NTN24 up until this moment was on direct TV channel 725 in Venezuela. Now it seems it's no longer there. We don't know if it will come back on or not. Venezuela has thwarted all mass media controls information, and every day the regime is intensifying and radicalizing the scenario. That is neither democratic nor relates to a democratic country.
Why is the truth covered up?
We now have contact with opposition legislator Maria Corina Machado. Good afternoon, Maria Corina. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We've walked around the Venezuelan capital. This is what we've heard from protesters in the street. A group of Venezuelans have come with banners and messages, insisting the Spanish government speak out against the violent acts within the last days. I made the decision to take out that fascist channel from Venezuelan cable operators. Go to hell with your poison. That's the voice of Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela.
One thinks of a government that defends its citizens and respects its constitution. It's made to govern the political and social development, a government where it's evident that it was founded on the basis of freedom. In Venezuela, that freedom in the hands of the media is a threat to the socialist-based Chavistas in power.
Cuidado, Joy.
Off the air, NTN24.
NTN24.
It was a decision by the state. CNN will leave Venezuela. No more war propaganda. I don't allow war propaganda. If you all don't rectify, get out of Venezuela, CNN. Get out. That was the voice of the president, Nicolas Maduro.
A different story is told out in Venezuela's streets. It resembles more of a scene like Pablo Picasso's Guernica. Bodies thrown in the street with hate. They're fused with the smoke and tear gas. Is the state's opinion the only one?
Look, what we have is a state decision to dominate the media in Venezuela, controlled totally by the state. So citizens will only have one side of the facts, the government.
The universal call for human rights stresses upon the freedom of expression. It's a commitment many states have sworn to fulfill. Venezuela also promised to do the same when it joined the United Nations. The reality shows otherwise.
It's a chaotic situation, but what certainly worries us most is that it implicates a crisis with no electoral solution. I support these brave students. I support all the people who have come once again to demand what? Basic things: democracy, liberty, justice, respect for human rights. Only in cruel places like Cuba under the Castro brothers and Venezuela under Chavez and under Maduro, that's a crime.
One by one, the media outlets refusing to bow down to the rules of the socialist regime are disappearing. It's the information that's scaring officials running Venezuela.
The Federation of Journalists in Spain repudiates anyone who restricts the freedom of information anywhere. Anyone who restricts the freedom of information anywhere. Reporters Without Borders condemns this act of censorship by the Venezuelan government. We believe that demonstrations must be disseminated and civil society has a right to all and uncensored information. The sanction that NTN24 suffered is undoubtedly an act of censorship that thankfully is not a common practice by democratic governments in the region.
In Venezuela, journalists risk their lives practicing their profession and must don bulletproof vests. According to the National Press Workers Union, over 30 journalists have been injured. The union says the right to work and the protection of media workers are being violated.
Members of the National Guard immediately attacked us, beat us. They butted me personally with assault rifles. They threw my co-worker to the ground and immediately stripped us of our gear. There's no need to wait to be kidnapped for 10 years. They'll shoot you or leave someone injured after a riot. There was an excess of force there and there was an abuse of authoritative power. We broadcasted a debate with students in favor and against the government of President Nicolas Maduro. We were then told we were revoked. They withdrew the permission to do our work as journalists in Venezuela. To the international organizations that support us, please, no more oppression, no more. The fact it happened to a Colombian channel, the voice and the possibility the rest of Latin America has to inform about what is happening in Venezuela is now closed, and that is very unfortunate. It is deplorable, and this should not exist. Only the autocrats act like this, I say. The closing of a media outlet, the censoring of the signal, the censoring of the opposition only proves the media blackout Venezuelans have fallen victim to for several years. I invite you, President Maduro, to Colombia. I invite you to see any march. There are always marches in our country, and they are clearly open to the freedom of expression. The mass media can come, they can cover, they can tell what's happening in Colombia now, and we don't fear that at all. We are not shutting down media outlets, and we are not stopping newsprint from arriving to newspapers, or blocking television and radio signals, or blocking the internet. No, President Maduro, come to Colombia and come learn what a true democracy is, where the opposition is given guarantees.
In a statement, the press associations of South America rejected media censorship and warned the newsprint shortage could lead to the disappearance of independent news outlets.
When will newsprint appear again so the media can do their job, asked Enrique Capriles, governor of Miranda State. That's part of the agenda.
According to Marco Ruiz, General Secretary of Venezuela's National Workers Union, ex-President Hugo Chavez was able to deal with critics better than Nicolás Maduro. Today, any criticism against the man in charge is punished and silenced.
Look how they're hitting them. Look, this is not a lie. They're killing us in Venezuela. This microphone can no longer be seen in Venezuela. This signal can no longer be seen in Venezuela because the cowards in the Venezuelan government took it off the air, and because they were the only ones with the courage to cover what was happening Wednesday. Really, I'm so sorry a media outlet like yourselves, so reliable, so honorable, and above all, so courageous, can no longer be seen by Venezuelans. Censoring NTN24 is a very negative precedent against the freedom of expression in Venezuela. It's worrying for all of us journalists, because what's happening with NTN24 can happen to CNN, it can happen to TV Venezuela, it can happen to all journalists.
Métase, señor, métase ya. Coño, señora, métase usted ya, métase usted ya.
They dispatch a large amount of police to capture any person in the street to see if they caught a journalist or any other that may directly affect emotion, freedom, the motive to change that Venezuelans have. These are called miraculous catches, and that violates human rights, and it's a terrorist act.
Despite the media blackout the government instills within the outlets in its own country, a new hope arises amid the pain. There are now less journalists covering the events in the streets, but a cell phone and the courage and dignity to confront their oppressors are now enough to show the world the pain felt daily in Venezuela, where authorities attack the peace of mind and the citizens they had sworn to protect.
Yes, my dear viewers and listeners, it is true. Let me give you some statistics. In the month of February and March, we are told that 116 media workers were affected so far. There have been 65 cases of harassment of media workers, 34 cases of physical assault, 28 cases of confiscated cameras and cell phones and other equipment, 23 arrests of journalists or citizen journalists, persons who are involved in citizen journalism. Yes, we even had one journalist who was shot. Yes, my dear viewers and listeners. And there's so many more things that have taken place, but I know the video has shown you a lot, and we will be showing you more in the very near future. I want you to understand something. Journalists have been threatened. Messages have been sent to them telling them, we know where you live, we know who your children are, we know who your mothers are. Why? For covering what is happening in Venezuela. Now, what has the authorities in the Caribbean said so far about all of this atrocities being meted out to the people of Venezuela? We have CARICOM making a statement, and I want to refer to it, and we know that our Prime Minister is the chairman of CARICOM now. This was his statement, and I quote, "The Caribbean community is concerned by the confrontations which have taken place in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela over the past few days in the course of demonstrations. CARICOM deplores the deaths of 3 persons arising from the resulting acts of violence." This statement was the 18th of February 2014. "The community calls for respect for the democratically elected government of the Bolivarian Republic. In all democracies, citizens have the right to air their views and differences. However, this must be done within the constitutional framework and not through violent demonstrations." Let me pause here. So since you say that you deplore the violence that has taken place and you say violent demonstrations, then this implies that you are blaming the protesters for the violence. But as the clips you saw show, it is state authorities, the army and police, who are meting out violence upon the Venezuelan people. The most the protesters will do is pelt back stones or pelt back cans of tear gas that they pelt at them. It is the government who is entertaining and exercising anti-rights policies by not allowing the press to access US dollars to buy paper from outside so they could print. We are told about 10 newspapers so far have halted operations during the protests and even before because of not being able to access paper, because they need permission from the government to buy US dollars to be able to trade, to buy paper from outside. This kind of behavior on the part of a government is tyrannical and it is dictatorship. It is against the rights and freedoms of the people, and CARICOM need to do better than that, than to just call the demonstrations violent. They need to acknowledge the responsibility of the government of Venezuela in perpetuating violence upon its own people. And the fact that CARICOM has not done that is shameful, and it leaves us to wonder where exactly their allegiance lies, with the protection of the rights and freedoms of people, or with the favor with a government that gives them handouts. You see, you can't take that position. Because the reality is, when you compromise your freedom of speech, your freedom of expression for some material benefit, then ultimately you will lose both the material benefit and your freedom of expression. So, we want you to understand this. And at the end, here's a message for Nicolás Maduro. Llamó al presidente Nicolás Maduro y el gobierno de Venezuela para detener los abusos de los derechos humanos del pueblo de Venezuela. La violencia y los abusos patrocinados por el Estado por parte de los colectivos y los ataques por parte de funcionarios de la Guardia Nacional Bolivariana y cuerpos policiales impuestos al pueblo venezolano son vergonzosos y yo los condeno. El gobierno debe desarmar a los colectivos y condenar su violencia. El gobierno debe poner fin a sus políticas que están obstaculizando la libertad de prensa por medio de la censura de una estación de televisión y el bloqueo de los periódicos, el acceso a la moneda para comprar papel. El gobierno debe detener la censura al Internet y restricciones en el acceso a ciertas páginas web. Hay que detener también las presiones excesivas por parte del gobierno hacia los medios de comunicación que ocasionan autocensura. Si el socialismo está en contra de los derechos y libertades de su pueblo, entonces hay que olvidar el socialismo, porque su papel como el gobierno no es proteger el socialismo, sino para proteger los derechos y las libertades inalienables de todos los pueblos de Venezuela, incluyendo el 49% que no votó por usted. Este es un mensaje de Anissa Batiste, líder político del Partido Republicano Democrático de San Vicente y las Granadinas. Yes, my dear people, thank you for viewing. Remember that you may call us. The number is 528-1015. And until our next program, stay tuned to Serving the People for more issues from us. Amen.